Are we on? I think we're on. Hello? Okay. You're like way taller than me, Carrie, or something. And of course, I don't know how to do this correctly. There. Oh, you got it. Can I have your attention if you're in the room? Ro, I need you to sit down. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the September meetup of Black Women You Should Know About. My name is Donna Ray Pearson. I will not spend a lot of extra time introducing myself tonight because I am going to end up being a presenter tonight in just a few moments after I wrap up the introduction. Tonight, actually, God, where do I begin between the debate last night and yeah, right? And actually watching my granddaughter play volleyball this afternoon. And she's a seventh grader. Get it right, Grandma. She's a seventh grader. And so I guess in middle school, the rules have changed so much since I was a kid. They can't play in 501 until they're in seventh grade. Okay. And she's at a school that does no cuts. So there's actually 3 teams for the seventh grade. And it's really about the challenge of learning how to truly learn a skill, be on a team, and make a difference all at the same time. And you can see their skill levels are different, and how they negotiate that and manage that in life is really interesting. Being an ex volleyball player, being a sports person, I'm a true believer in team sports because it teaches you so many different skills. But oosh, it was, and I just, I literally teared up watching her the first week. And even this week, it was like, because I'm seeing the transformation happen in person. So think about that. And I guess I'm comparing that to I too had to learn a new skill this past month. I submitted and I'm totally, whenever I get a chance to say it out loud, I submitted my first federal competitive grant. And yes, it was for $70,000. I have written a grant, but someone else co-wrote it with me. So this one was totally my responsibility. So not only did I have to learn new skills, I had to have a great attitude through the whole thing. But then I found there came a time when I actually needed a team. I actually needed to reach out to other people to help me through this process because I was new, one, and I just needed that feedback and that support. So I'm also looking at her thinking, I'm kind of going through the same thing, all at the same time. So it doesn't matter where you are in life. You can always learn something new and try something new and grow from it, right? So that's my little tidbit for September. But we have a great lineup. We have a great lineup tonight. I am one of the speakers tonight. I learned about bell hooks, but I will have a formal introduction for a change. And we also have a little bit different. Oh, wait a minute. I just realized she's a little late. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. She has been in contact with me. Daisy will be up, and then Anita will be doing something more directed toward voter engagement. So she's not actually looking at a specific woman, she's looking at us as a collective. So with that, I'm going to switch places and pretend that I'm not in charge.
Good evening. We all know that Donna Ray is always in charge, even when she steps back and puts others in the front, so we're okay with that. Okay. So I have the pleasure of introducing Donna Ray Duckett Pearson, who is the daughter of Gertrude Faytree Brown Duckett, who is the daughter of Leela May, who is the daughter of Gertrude, who is the daughter of Ida, who is the daughter of Lucinda, who is the daughter of Dorcas, who is the daughter of an unnamed woman from Africa, most likely Ghana, Liberia, or Sierra Leone. Donna Ray's journey is fueled by a deep passion for storytelling. Imagine that. A self described creative, nerdy, nature loving Black woman in America, she thrives on spontaneous adventures. Daily, there is probably some camera in her hand. Yes, daily, there is some camera in her hand. Her love for the alchemy of storytelling and its transformative power led her to become a researcher, historian, and historic preservationist. She honed her skills at Washburn University and Wichita State University. Still, her true education in the art of storytelling came from narratives shared at her family's kitchen table. Feel familiar to anybody? Mm-hmm. As a radical in her field, she uses her skills to amplify the voices of all communities so they feel empowered. She teaches communities how to create and control their own narratives. She strives to ensure the community's stories are heard, celebrated, cherished, and passed on to the next generation. Donna Ray highly values participatory history-based research projects that give underrepresented groups agency to tell their stories in the most accessible way possible. That's about adaptability. She has conducted and participated in numerous history, community engagement, and oral history projects and has developed themed walking and driving tours for organizations. Oh, they need to hear all that. They need to know all about you. Why would I not? No, ma'am. Why would I not tell people about you? Many of these projects are through her consulting companies, Kitchen Table History and The Other Road. During the past 30 years, her skills have helped her engage diverse communities in creating and preserving their local history. So I present to some and introduce to others, Ms. Donna Ray.
Thank you. I very rarely get to hear that particular introduction out loud, so it makes me smile and almost tear up because I'm always almost tearing up. Okay. And how do I want it to be? Daisy, can you hit? I don't know. There we go. And actually I need to pull it back because I decided, unfortunately, Shamika Sims, right, was supposed to do bell hooks tonight. Go back one. Was supposed to do bell hooks tonight, and she unfortunately is not able to be here. So just because I'm like so super curious and I really have only kind of tapped a little bit into bell hooks, I was like, well, let me see what I can throw together. So this is not in-depth, comprehensive. This is an overview. So if you don't know a lot about bell hooks, this will be a good intro tour. If you do know a lot about bell hooks, feel free to chime in, and I have not a problem with that. But Bell Hooks is an author. She's an acclaimed author, cultural critic, and she's a feminist theorist as well as an educator. So, next slide. She was born September 25th, 1952 in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, actually as Gloria Jean Watkins. She grew up in a working class segregated neighborhood. She was one of 6 children of Rosa Bell Watkins and Beatus Beatus, I don't know how you say that, Beodis Watkins. Her childhood actually was shaped her understanding of racial and social inequities. Being I don't know. Okay, her father was not happy about the way I pronounced his name. I don't know. Okay, well, we'll proceed because it stopped. She was born in 1952, actually just a few years before the Brown decision. So, but the thing is, being Kentucky, even though by the time she got to school, the Brown decision had passed, she still went to segregated schools. This experience would later influence her writing. She was an avid reader. In her obituary, her sisters talk about the fact she always had a book in her hand. And eventually, she did write a memoir in 1996. The name of it is Bone Black Memories of a Girlhood in 1996. Oh, well. In it, she states, "It is a story of girlhood rebellion, of my struggle to create self and identity distinctions from and yet inclusive of the world around me." Um, and what she also stated about her childhood is on the screen, but I'll read it. She finds, and she refers to herself as she in the book. So she, referring to herself, she finds another world in books. Escaping into the world of novels is one way she learns to enjoy life. But a book in hand enjoys life, but novels only ease the pain momentarily as she holds a book in hand as she reads. It is the poetry that changes everything. When she discovers the romantics, it is like losing part of herself and recovering it. She memorizes poems. She recites them ironing or washing dishes. Reading Emily Dickinson, she has a sense the spirit can grow in the solitary life. And so that again is kind of a description of how she viewed herself and what her shape, her molding was. And she was also influenced by her grandmother's storytelling and other strong female figures in her life. So, but after graduating from high school, she got a scholarship to attend Stanford University, and she received a bachelor's degree in English in 1973. She went to graduate school at the University of Wisconsin-Madison with a master's in English in 1976, and she got her PhD from the University of California, Santa Cruz, in 1983. If you can't tell, she was an academic. I could only find a couple of different references of her ever working outside of academia. She worked as a telephone operator at one point in her life. It sounded like an undergrad, but she taught at various universities for a while. But she also she worked at a publishing company. I couldn't find much information about that. She did dedicate her life to teaching. Her last teaching position was at Ray College in Kentucky, where she founded the Bell Hooks Institute. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. She emphasized that her identity as a Black woman from the South was central to her worldview and her writing. Next slide. Okay. Bell Hooks was actually a deeply private person and didn't really talk about herself much in public. But apparently, and again, maybe you guys know more than I do, there was some question about her sexual identity. So she says, regarding her sexual identity, Hooks described herself as a queer pass gay. And she used the term pass from the French language, translating not in the English language. So I was still, even as I read that out loud, I'm still not quite sure what that means, but you interpret it as you want. She describes being queer in her own words, not who you're having sex with, but about being at odds with everything around it. She stated, as an essence of queer, I think Tim Dean's work on being queer or queer not as being about who you're having sex with, that can be a dimension of it. But queer as being about the self is at odds with everything around it, and it has to invent and find a place to speak and thrive to live. She also stated in another interview that she actually hadn't had a partner for over 17 years, and that she was celibate, and she didn't think her life was any less meaningful. So you don't need a partner to be a full person. Just keep that in the back of your brain, okay? Um, but again, she did dedicate her life to teaching. Next slide. Her pen name um, was taken from her great grandmother, Belle Blair Hooks, and she chose it as an act to honor her grandmother. She opted not to capitalize her name and hoping to keep the public focus off of her name and more on her work. But over the decades at the forefront of Black feminist writing, the punctuation choice actually brought her more to the forefront than it did to the background, right? And again, she was honoring her maternal great grandmother and trying to detach from the work, trying to detach herself from the work. She said, I claim this legacy of defiance, of will, of courage, affirming my link to female ancestors who were bold and daring in their speech. During the during a during a public speaking engagement, she did make note or comment that even though she doesn't really care and she thinks the United States is too wrapped up in this personal identity thing, she did say she got annoyed when people actually were asking for her for things and still not spelling her name right. So, she was human as well. Why did she become a writer? Well, again, this was a very quick turnaround, and there was too much information to put together. So, the things that I gathered from what I researched is that she enjoyed exploring issues of race, um, and her work is a blend of academic and personal narrative. If you've actually ever listened to her book, it's almost like listening to a speech as opposed to reading a book. And then when it's more scholarship oriented, you really have to pay attention. In other words, if you've not done it, and I encourage you to do it, you really have to pay attention. But the thing that she really wanted to try to do is make sure her work was accessible to different audiences, which I appreciate that, meaning who needs a footnote, really? A bib in the back is fine. Most people don't really follow up. So, okay, next one. Ooh, I didn't know I was going to do that. um, and I am going to be, and I think part of the reason why Bell Hooks fascinates me is because I don't understand feminism. And in a way, as I started getting into her and started listening, I downloaded a book I'm getting ready to talk about and started listening to it. It's like, oh, this is why I don't get feminism. This is why I always call it something else. So I'm going to attempt to explain feminist theory in 20 seconds or less. Okay? I am not doing it justice. Its aim is to understand the nature of gender inequality. It examines women's and men's social roles, experience, interests, chores, and feminist politics. The problem is this is normally talked about through a white middle class woman's lens, right? And that's why I have a really hard time relating to it. The Black feminist thought / theory also considers oppression. And we're talking about oppression and its relationship to the emasculation of Black men. So even though all of the other is true, it's things that we go through, Black women have a whole different layer they have to go through because of their relationship, the dynamics involved with Black men also needing to be the patriarchs, right? So don't ask me to clarify anymore. But she does clarify a little bit. Simply put, feminism is a movement to end sexism, sexist exploitation, and oppression. And she liked that definition because it does not imply that men are the problem. It's the system, it's the structures that put them in place that are the actual problem. So let's move on. Um, so she started out writing poems, and again studying English. But her first book she started was called "Ain't I a Woman? Black Women and Feminism." Guess how old she was, y'all? Who said that? Do you already know? She's 19. Yeah. So she wrote a critically acclaimed book at 19 years old. She could only, I mean, she did continue to rise. The book examines some of the themes that she examines are racism, sexism, and it's all from a black woman's perspective. Now, this is in the late 70s, early 80s, I believe. And so this work is actually pretty still new on the scene. And I looked at when she was born compared to when I was born and trying to figure out, in an effort to figure out why I didn't really know her. It's because she was growing in popularity as I was growing up. So she was not yet incorporated into our classrooms, right? So if you don't know her or are not familiar with her as you wish to be, it's because she was not on the scene as big as she is by the time she passes, anyway. Um, but again, her key themes are race, gender, capitalism, media, class, love, education, and social structure. What she attempted to do in her work was, she tried to help people make connections through oppression. And I'm going to try to explain that a little bit better. Meaning, instead of finding all the ways that we are different and dividing us, she tried to bring us together through a common theme. So, as women, we can all have this common theme of oppression, and how we relate to other people was part of what she was trying to do. Her call to action, her writing was actually a call to action encouraging self awareness, activism, and social changes. But she also emphasized love as a revolutionary force, which that really, struck my attention. Nope, I'm just changing pages, not you. In one particular work, All About Love, it explores how love is the foundation for happiness, self-esteem, empathy, and social equity. It urges us to engage with love purposefully, honoring it with respect and openness. All About Love, she wrote in 2000, delves into the reasons why love often remains out of reach for many people. The book, authored by her, explores the misconceptions about love and the unrealistic expectations surrounding romantic relationships. Hooks analyzes the prevalent obstacles to experiencing love and outlines the measures that individuals and society can take to foster a more loving and nurturing environment. Um, this quote is a little bit long. It's from the book, and I don't, I might come back to it because I found another one that I liked better. um, what love is. Love as the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's spiritual growth. That is how she defined love. And what did I do? Okay. Okay. That'll do it. The chord is in the bag, um, the military print bag. So I will go ahead and read the long quote since you don't have anything to look at anyway. Um, this one made me think a little bit. To begin by always thinking of love as an action rather than feeling is one way in which anyone using the word in this manner automatically assumes accountability and responsibility. We're often taught that we have no control over our feelings, yet most of us accept that we choose our actions, that intention and will inform what we do. We also accept that our actions have consequences. To think of actions shaping feelings is one way we rid ourselves of conventionally accepted assumptions, such as that parents love their children, or that one simply falls in love without exercising will or choice, that there are such things as crimes of passion, i.e., he killed her because he loved her so much. If we were constantly remembering that love is as love does, we wouldn't use the word in a manner that devalues and degrades its meaning. When we are loving, we openly and honestly express care, affection, responsibility, respect, commitment, and trust. So I thought that quote was pretty telling and very interesting to consider, especially when we go along with that. What the definition of love is that the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another spiritual growth. That's a lot, right? Um, and the fact that, again, love is an action, that love is as love does, and love is an act of will, namely both an intention and an action. So, just something to consider about her. Um, some of her works. Um, just a little bit about what she did is that she published more than 30 books ranging in topics, again, from black men, patriarchy, masculinity, to self-help, things to help people teach, personal memoirs, sexuality, race, class, all sorts of things, right? She ran the gamut. So I think that's where she gets the cultural critic from. And I'm not going to read it, but I did print it out. She critiqued Lemonade by Beyonce. Yeah, right? I was like, and at first I was like, oh, she's going to be like all in this and happy for it. No, she was not, because it was filled with a lot of stereotypes that we are taught are normal, and the fact that she was over sexualizing women just to make a point, and that even that it was a very violent. It was steeped in violence. So if you haven't seen it, I do have it with me. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. It was like 4 pages long. So, but her most critically acclaimed work, like I mentioned before, was Ain't I a Woman? Black Women in Feminism, and she wrote it in 1981. The book deconstructs the impact of racism and sexism on black women and challenges mainstream feminist thought. Womanhood, Miss Hooks said, could not be reduced to a singular experience, but had to be considered within a framework encompassing race and class. She called for a new form of feminism, one that recognized differences and inequalities among women as a way of creating a new, more inclusive feminist movement. And she actually felt that she attained that goal. So, the next one. And so she did leave a lasting impact on the field of feminist theory, cultural studies, education, and media studies. She inspired a generation of activists, writers, and academics across the intersections of race, class, and gender. Her approach remains essential to understanding contemporary social issues. She won a Pulitzer Prize for Poetry, a Writers' Award from the Reader's Digest Fund, the NAACP Image Award, the National Book Award for Fiction. She was inducted into the Kentucky Writers Hall of Fame. She helped found the Bell Hooks Institute, which keeps her art, personal things, and books. It looks I looked at the website. It's really great. It looked like a very interesting place to visit. Um, in 2004, she returned to Kentucky to teach at Berea College. By 2010, she had semi retired, took up Buddhism, and visited her neighbors. In 2014, that's when the Bell Hooks Institute opened up. And she continued to write on a wide range of topics. But she started shifting a little bit. It was more about the importance of community and healing as the goal of movements like feminism and anti-racism. So she actually started outlining a pathway that even if you're involved in a movement, this is the way you can actually get some reconciliation. Bell Hooks died on December 15th, 2021, at the age of 69 of kidney failure. And what was said of her is that she reshaped the landscape of feminist and social theory, reminding us the power of love, education, and critical thinking. So that is all I have about Bell Hooks. Does anyone have any questions I can attempt to answer, or at least show you which way to go? Oh, look at y'all being nice to me. Okay. Uh-huh. Okay, I will show it to you. Yeah, I started reading and I'm like, oh, she liked it. Then I was like, oh, wait a minute. Oh, man. So I love her writing style. And again, that it's very simple and straightforward, but it's complex at the same time. So there's no way you're just going to kind of read and skim. You are going to you're going to pay attention to what the words say on the page. So, is there anybody else? Yes. Not that I got into, but I'm not going to say that because she did write 2 or 3 books specifically talking about her perspective. And I might have those titles with me. So I can't say 100% sure. She's definitely someone that I have like 3 more road trips this fall. I've downloaded at least one of her books. I downloaded the first one, Aren't I a Woman, and I plan on downloading a couple of different other ones to listen to because, again, I've been exposed to her before, but I've never followed her writings in that regard. And I think it would be interesting to, especially track her over time, how her point of view changed from that first 19-year-old to that 69-year-old, right? 50 years later. Yeah. So, but yes, no, I cannot. But if you read and you find out, you will let us know, right? Okay. Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you guys. And now I just stay up here. Did you have an introduction for me, for you? You did. Huh? Okay. I know, yeah. We try not to use that word. Okay. I Oh, okay. Okay, Kim, I don't have a problem with that. You got to be on the mic. If you have learned nothing else in this room, you have to be on the mic. So we're going to let Anita introduce Daisy, okay?
I wasn't fully prepared to do this. I just wanted to say nice things about Daisy because she's not the type to brag about herself. But I've seen her be involved in community work for many years, and she's passionate about her values and puts them into action. And so I'm excited to hear what she has to share and talk about tonight. But here's Daisy.
Shout out to Anita because I don't like to talk about myself, but I will talk about the DNC. I have no problem with that. Mm-hmm. Yes. So on the fly because that's how Black women rock. Actually, that's where our magic is. That's where I always feel. A little bit higher. Okay. I'm short, but not that short. So is that better? Is that good? Okay. So I had the great pleasure of doing Miss Ella Josephine Baker. Basically, the title of this presentation is A Life of Activism and Leadership. Miss Ella has walked me through this whole year. I started a book earlier this year from her, written by, and I'm going to say her last name incorrect, so please bear with me, Barbara Ratsabin. Is a historian who did a biography on her, who I've got most of this information from, and then other pieces of paper. Barbara herself, I would love to do Women You Should Know. She's currently a very, let's say, active feminist, Black feminist specifically. But the introduction to Miss Ella Baker was her preference, but her mother named her Ella Josephine Baker. She was born December 13th, 1903, in Norfolk, Virginia. She was a Sagittarius, known for her grasswork organization within civil rights, advocates for people, especially youth, in bringing change. She influenced organizations such as the NAACP, the Southern Church Leadership Conference, and SNCC. I personally, when I was doing more research on her, I wouldn't even just say she influenced. I would say she created the strategy that was used and executed in most places, which we will get into a little bit further. So her early life of education, and that's like 3 slides in. Yeah, right there. So her early life to education. Raised in a family with a strong traditions of community service and activism, graduated as a valedictorian of Shaw University in North Carolina, inspired by her mother and grandmother through stories of their resilience. Her grandmother was a slave and earned her freedom, and kept coming back to her and telling her all the stories that she used to know, that she will later tell SNCC of how it used to be. In historic context, the same time, I thought this was really cool about her. Her parents, Blake Baker and Ann Ross, were married in 1896, the same year as Plessy versus Ferguson, the decision that upheld segregation and separate equal doctrine. At this present time, so there was a lot of racial justice scenarios that even in the year she came in that affected her, and she was always aware. Miss Baker also took the opportunity to live during racial challenging times through the Reconstruction of the South, facing political disenfranchisement, radical voices, and harsh realities and segregation. She saw it as young as 6 years old, when she was told that she was Black, and a little boy from across the street said the NIGG word. Okay, just want to make sure there's little kids around, so want to be very fair to that. Her gender expectations, Miss Baker, was reflected, and that was where she idolized her mother. Even without saying, her mother and her grandmother, before it was coined, were known as feminists. So a lot of the trajectory she chooses and the things that she decides, it's because of the reflection of their feminist ideas that she takes. Like, for example, her mother, Ann Ross, never took her father's name, so it was Ann Ross Baker. And before now it's normal to hyphenate. Around that time, you would not hyphenate, but she always felt like her identity was worth it, and her daughters and children of 13, because she was number 8, would need to know. Miss Baker was also on the opportunity, made her own decisions, so far that sometimes was criticized from others, especially in her early life of education. Miss Baker did not marry. Well, it was hard. She kept a private life. Some historians said she was married for 20 years quietly. Some people said she got married and divorced. There's no record of divorce papers. They know there was a separation. And she never took her husband's name, even though there are some, which was really cool because New York University says that Baker comes from her husband, which that was never true. That was her father, Blake Baker's name. And she never had children. Not because she didn't want children, she just had more of a passion for advocacy work in political organizing, and she felt like being a dutiful mother was not going to be something in her scope. Let's see, her connections to history, all the way from her grandmother being born in slavery, and all the way to the point where her grandmother was very heavily influenced in her because her grandmother died at the age of 96. Miss Baker also took a lot of her grasp from her mother, and so much that when her mother sat her down and told her how much she liked Shaw University, that is the reason why Miss Ella Baker decided to go. Miss Baker went to Shaw University, and right here, this is a picture of her, not her, but her class. She was not in it. She was not the best fan of taking pictures. She never felt the need of it. And then Miss Baker's famous quote around that time period was, she was known around campus more of, it's not about breaking the rules, it's about challenging the rules, essentially, was her philosopher in college. And also one of her roommates and classmates, Miss Effie, used to say Ella had a heavy voice and would help us win the trophies and the honors within their school. She was in the ability for all of us to understand that what it means to be a force. Next slide. So her beginning activism. So essentially, she begins her activism in New York, where she falls in love with the political radicalization of socialism and the inspiration of youth. She joins the NAACP in around 1940. As a secretary, in later years becomes the director of many branches. She worked on local communities and empowerment. These 3 stages are basically the beginning of her whole body of work. Miss Ella Parker became awake back in 1920-1930 when she went to Harlem, New York. When she went to New York, she started with a lot of odd jobs, but then she found the ability to see what the rumblings in the times. At that time, Harlem was going through its renaissance. From all the way she had the opportunity to see in lecturers like Marcus Garvey, from the Pride movement to the Black Socialist movement, which was all in her scope of what she saw mobilizing should look like. Miss Baker at the same time took the opportunity to then, let's see here. Oh, yep. Miss Baker then also took the opportunity to go to the South around 1957 to 1960. She helped organize the Southern Christian Leadership Conference alongside Dr. King. Some people would argue she started it and made Dr. King follow her. In some scenarios where I thought it was really cool, where Barbara put in her book of radicalized democratic processes. She served as the executive director, which was highly contested. Dr. King and her had a fun, I would say, big brother, little brother, sister relationship, where they looked at each other at times, did not agree of what the movement should look like. So when she wanted to become the executive director, Dr. King was the first one to tell her, no, you shouldn't do it. But later on, because of her relationships that she had at the NAACP, basically they advocated for her to take that position. She promoted nonviolent directions and voting rights. She was not a fan of Malcolm X. She not favored to any of his speaking at that particular time, as she felt as black, especially as young bodies were typically the ones who started the conversation. She didn't like the idea of them being hurt immediately. Let's see here. Miss Ella Baker has had the ability to bridge organizations and that were divided. Her strategic roles in crusades and citizenship helped establish individual leaders and recruits such as Rustin and Levinson from SLC's Crusaders citizenship. Challenges that she had when Baker arrived to Atlanta to begin her work, the organization lacked basic resources such as an office space and staff. She relied heavily on personal connections and making shifts inside the office environments to make progress. At one time, they had told her she should close the office, and she refused. Miss Baker also had tension because of her philosophy that she had at the Southern Church Leadership Conference. While Baker was an optimistic individual, unfortunately, a lot of individuals did not feel like that way when it came to African American communities organizing. She foresaw the structure and the leadership is a consistent conflict. With her vision of localizing grassroots activism, despite the reserves of the older generation, she moved forward. So much that in that particular time, that's where she ends up thinking about what would the younger generation look like. So that moves into founding the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Inspired by Greensboro sit-in, she helped organize and found SNCC in the 1960s at Shaw University. Supporting this philosophy of participating democracy and decentralized leadership, SNCC became a powerful force within the civil rights movement, focusing on students' activism and direction and direct action. It's okay. Thank you. Within networks, so Ella basically within SNCC to help develop the formation of encouraging grassroots leadership, network support, committing to the bigger picture, sit-ins success. She ended up rolling out several of those. In 1960, the Southwide Student Leadership Conference, Baker organized a gathering at Shaw University, bringing a sit-in leadership together where they could meet and discuss strategies and explore future actions. These conferences led to formation of new independent organizations shaping largely by Baker, and around this time is when she starts coming as the key strategy of when it comes to the civil rights movement. Encouraging students for student autonomy, she also encouraged roles such as ensuring that young individuals such as John Lewis and other individuals had the ability to be taken serious with inside their activism when others critiqued. She was on record several times defending those individuals. Influencing the younger generation, Baker experienced, I would say the reason why she influenced them more, what some don't say is because she liked the militia. She was a secret socialist, I would say, in some moments. And the younger body individuals amplified those voices for her. So key contributions to the civil rights movement. Advocacy around group central leadership, played a key role in organizing the Freedom Summer of 1964 and mentored young leaders such as Dinah Nash, Bob Mose, and Stokely Carmichael. This is a really, this is in the later years. She's speaking in Puerto Rico about freedom, this is where the concept of her being a socialist was never really talked about, but said she went to a socialist militia conference. They asked her to talk about what it is going to take to win. It's about 2 minutes, and I think if you press play, it kind of leads into the philosophy and her leadership. Ella Baker. So in that emphasis, that is her in her later years. A lot of people would say that is her being timid. When they saw that conversation, they said if you had seen her, especially when leaving the NAACP, you would have seen her at her height and her lack of a better term. Somebody had said in a book that you could reference her to a pit bull because she would be that vicious when it comes to organization. In fact, that is particularly one of the reasons why she left the NAACP, which I thought was really great foresight. She saw the crippleization of it. She saw, unfortunately, due to an old regime in policy, she felt as the NAACP will not be effective to make actual change. So much that when she advocated to the branches her last 5 years, she was ostracized out. But because she had made such a personal network, individuals had basically wrote on her behalf to say that she needs to still be part of this conversation. Her philosophy, essentially, that has been haunting me this whole summer, and we'll speak about it later, the reasoning why, but she had this quote that has stuck out to me and a lot of individuals: strong people don't need strong leaders. Ella Baker's famously said in this emphasis that the strength of a movement from people, not to rely on a singular charismatic leader. She believed a community is already capable of fighting on their own liberation. They just need their own tools. So when she thought about that in that capacity, she would always say in that scenario, several times she was quoted, strong people don't need strong leaders. Empowering the masses, Baker believed that most people were affected by injustice, by the greater potential to bring about change. Rather than focusing on the leadership of one's individual, she worked with equipping and empowering orderly individuals, giving them their ability to fight their own struggles. Her philosophy inspired generations within the civil rights activist movement and leadership within political aspects. She has, I'm still trying to figure it out, she was an advisor to several elected individuals within the South and also in the DC, but unfortunately her advisory and most of her work that she did that she felt was most effective, she made sure intentionally she got rid of. She believed very much in the bottom-up approach. Baker's advocacy from the bottom-up approach was rooted in her beliefs of sustainable social transformation comes from empowering the grassroots. She believed in the aspect of, practorial democracy, where those who are directly impacted in the justice are able to make their change. Her legacy within civil rights. She continued her work in justice into 1980. She worked with issues from prison reform, economic justice, and women's rights. She recognized today a model for communities organizing and leadership. Continuing her advocacy work in the 1980s, Ella Baker remained active in social justice even to her later years. Recognizing today's models of the community and organizing leadership, Ella Baker is celebrated today as one of the most influential community organizers in the American history. Her approach to focusing on the empowering of local grassroots leadership rather than relying on charismatic national figures, this group-centered leadership model has become a cornerstone in the effecting of organizational strategies in many contemporary social movements, particularly those that advocate for racial justice, women's rights, and economic equality. Her impact on the modern movement was really interesting for me. So at this present time, she has been quoted that her Black Lives Matter was one of her biggest impact of the movement that we could see currently. her emphasis of empowering marginalizing voices and activism. I would even say, for example, in this photo on, let's see here, I have to remember the, on Saturday, March 14th of 2022, a white supremacist New Yorker was murdered, 10 people, and shot them dead in Buffalo in front of a grocery store. In this aspect, two of the key organizers took the initiative to look up what exactly Ella Baker did and did a march in front of the grocery store, and that was the first banner when you walked out was there. Her leadership style has been such change in the democracy and the reproduction of how economic justice beliefs are, teaching self-sufficiency and patience in learning. Ms. Baker also took the opportunity to ensure that her legacy was also taken care of by ensuring that the next generation had the tools, the resources, and also the funding. Her later works were mostly to ensure any of these groups were funded, that she had strategized so they could continue. In conclusion, Miss Ella Baker reminds us all about the empowering work that she did. She died in December 13th, 1936. It wasn't a surprise to anybody. Everybody knew she was sick. She had been sick for some years. December 13, 1986. My bad. 96. No. So, yeah, December 13th of 1986. She had been sick for a long time, so it was not new to anybody, unfortunately. She died literally in a peaceful death, what most people would say. Her funeral was because she at that time had moved back to her favorite place that she always loved, was Harlem, New York. Her funeral was something to behold, according to some. A group of diverse individuals went to Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem to honor her, including political activists, entertainers, ordinary citizens. A group of individuals from a wide range of her life had came. Her legacy and connections and coalitions also had an opportunity to show up and have peace for her at those times. Her ideas were also symbolized in her funeral. For example, she had a private party the night before, or correction, she had passed already. They had a private party for her the night before to organize a symbolic stand-in somewhere down in the South in her honor. This was a tribute that Bernice Johnson did for her. Her favorite song was Guide My Feet by highlighted in her legacy. She also took the opportunity to ensure that at Shaw University there was a scholarship, which obviously is no longer there, but a scholarship in her eyes, so that to ensure that anybody who came after her would have the ability to pay 4 years or the school tuition. I guess that would be it. And there's any questions? No. Well, thank y'all.
Because I actually kind of love Ella Baker. So thank you for doing Ella. My mind was just kind of whirling back there. Who was familiar with Ella before tonight? But she was just a woman kind of hanging around. Yeah, so, and Tammy brings up a good point. I've seen 2 different movies with her in it, and she's always just this woman wandering around. And one time I caught a hold of that woman's name and looked her up and said, wait a minute. So thinking back to Bell Hooks, Ella would have been one of those women that Bell looked at and said, she is probably oppressed, right? She's the right era. She's doing a lot. and yet she is not being acknowledged in any way, shape, or form. So, and even today, even after all the research, all the things that we've done to elevate Black women's stories, she still, in 2024, is a woman wandering around in the background, barely getting a name on the screen. So I also wonder, and I am just talking, so please feel free to stop and ask burning questions. I also wonder if we had adopted her model of leadership, meaning if it's more of a, and it's going to segue into you, Anita, if we had adopted a much more grassroots model of leadership where we empower people no matter who they are, when King got assassinated or when Malcolm X got assassinated, would it have had the same impact on the movement if we had done it Ella's way? Just something to think about or comment on. Your choice.
I I was trying to keep it overall. From what I saw, Ella Ella chose what I how I take it. Ella chose to stay in the background, or the woman just wandering, because after a while, especially after she saw the work was being demolished at the NAACP, I wonder if she thought to herself, if I publicize my work, individuals will infringe on it and no longer allow her to continue her work. Because after the NAACP, she stopped even speaking what I saw in the engagements unless it was a small group. And then, but in quote from other people, they call her the mother of civil rights. They call, like, anybody that was a predominant civil rights individual, they all looked to her for directions. That's why it has even been rumored that she was advising presidents at some time, just to ensure that she had the opportunity. I don't think Ella. Also, I wonder sometimes, to answer that question, I wonder if she was a woman beyond her years. The time period that she has, a lot of the choices that she makes, and she even talks about sexuality that I didn't put in here. A lot of her choices were like within the 21st century right now. At that time period, that's still, and that was something that I was trying to figure out, and I didn't actually pinpoint it. But I believe the same time period when she was doing a lot of this, women were being sent to psych wards for being individualist outside of their own minds. So I also wonder if she was marginalized, because now on top of just being a Black woman, you know, or a woman in essence, she is a woman who's thinking within a time period that is not allowed. That was usually her issue with Dr. King, because Dr. King and her would have rebuttals back and forth. But he was a big donator to her. Like, for example, for SNCC, the first investment she got is from Dr. King. She forced Dr. King to give $800 to start the group.
Then I would still kind of agree with you in a different way. She was oppressed, and she developed a strategy to get around her oppression. So maybe that's another way of looking at it. And okay, Daisy, if you want to sneak away, that's fine. Well, I'm supposed to introduce Anita, who I do not. But I don't have your slide. Okay, to my messenger? Okay. Okay, I'll get over there then. Just start introducing yourself while I go to messenger, or we take a break. You handle it.
Yeah.
You're in charge.
Okay. Hopefully it only takes a second to get that pulled up, and I'll give it that second so that I'm not jumping the gun on saying stuff that would be in there. But yeah. Oh, you're sweet. I'm. Love that. just takes us right there. Hey. Yep. And can we get it full screen, or is this what we're working with? It's also fine if it's this way because it's still plenty big. Oh, sweet. Okay. Hey. It's so I'm the third one up after we've been learning things for an hour, so I'm not going to keep you guys very long. I could not think of a name for this presentation, but this is a cool picture of me that my daughter took of a shirt I had made. It was in 2020 during the Black Lives Matter movement, and I used to wear this shirt all the time. Unfortunately, it got stained and old and I don't have it anymore, but shout out the awesome shirt. We can go to the next slide. So hey, see, I told you I got this, guys. This is me. I'm Anita Alexander in Glorilla's voice. That's me. If you don't know that reference, don't worry about it. I work as the VP at a nonprofit org, so I do exactly this type stuff. I actually work for a nonpartisan organization that focuses on voting rights and getting people more involved in what's going on, which is, I'm sure, why Donna asked me if I would give this talk. But I'm just really passionate about my community and making a difference. And down at the bottom, it says something that I like to say during presentations is like, no one knows everything, but together we know a lot. And so there may be things I don't know, and maybe you guys do. And so hopefully we're here together. But we can go ahead. I'm going to give you this little table of contents. Basically, I'll do, introduction. We're past that part. I'm going to talk about apathy and what it means when people don't show up to vote, what it means to actually be civically engaged, Black women in this movement, because, I'm speaking to this audience, and then just some helpful things about voting in this election. And if it sounds like a lot, I promise this is not hella long. There's only 10 slides after this. And so we can go to the next one. One back. Yeah, go one back. Okay, so I wanted to talk about apathy. Apathy is just when you stop kind of caring or you withdraw from a thing. And I think that that's a very rational reaction to a system that doesn't represent us. And a lot of times people who don't vote don't want to, right? They're like, I don't vote, I don't care, I'm not doing that. And they're completely disengaged from the system because it doesn't represent them. They're not seeing their values reflected in government. They're not seeing elected officials doing anything that matters to them. And so it's easy for them to be like, I don't want anything to do with that. And I think it's important we acknowledge that up front, that that's a very real and rational reaction. But how can we expect change that we don't vote for? How can we expect things to happen that we don't take action to make happen? And so we're going to talk a little bit about voting, and I just want to give that as a preface. So we really don't have representation. If you talk to the people around you, like your friends, your family, like anyone in the community, you're going to find that you guys share a lot of values of things that you think are right and good and should be happening. No one wants to hit potholes. No one wants the schools underfunded. We have a lot of shared ideals about how things should be. And the only reason that our elected offices don't reflect all of our shared feelings, you can poll Kansas and 70, 80% of us want marijuana legalization. Everybody wants lower student loans. You could see really popular things that aren't happening in government. And this is why, because people don't turn out. This little graph says the obvious, but the red is what happens literally, actually every day, that people give campaign contributions to the government and they create laws in their favor. We see it all the time with big lobbying. The green is the democracy we talk about, right? It's the thing that's supposed to be happening, that we show up in numbers, we speak our truths. Those are the laws we get. So we basically have to disrupt this cycle by showing up. And until we do that, we're going to keep being dissatisfied in the way that we are. So you can go to the next one. So I wanted to talk a bit about civic engagement. Does anyone know what that means? If you don't, I did put it up there, so you know. But I think of voting as kind of one of the entry-level things you can do when you care about stuff. If you don't do nothing else, please go vote. But there's actually a lot you can do to really show up and care for the people in your community, and that's what being civically engaged means. It means that you are showing up on a collective action and identity that addresses a public issue of concern. When we get involved in things, it's usually not in some sort of selfish way, I want my kids' schooling to be better. I'm not worried about them other kids. No, it's we want everyone to have a better experience. And so when we are civically engaged, we're exercising shared values. like the things we want to see as a community. And it's really about like showing up for each other. Like that's what it comes down to at the end of the day, is like being in true community, like actually showing up and acting on the values you represent. And so let's talk about getting involved. This could mean a lot of things. You could show up to the school board meeting, and you're probably going to be there with a group like this where there's only a couple people because not enough people are plugged in. You could show up to city council, and it's the same thing. But by showing up, you inherently give yourself power because you become the person in the room. You become like the face people recognize, and you gain power in that way. Daisy can probably speak to this. We first met during the Black Lives Matter movement in 2020. And I hadn't been involved in a lot of city and like local stuff before then, but I started showing up to city council, and really quickly people knew my name. Really quickly people knew the things I cared about, and they knew like what I stood for and what I was behind. And so you build personal power along with community power when you show up. The Kansas legislature is another way you can get involved. If you want to talk to me about this, I'd love to talk to you about it. But we always see things after the fact. Like, oh, they raised taxes, what the hell? Or, oh, they did this, I can't believe, like, whose idea was that? And by being involved in the legislature, you can take actions on things before they happen. Like citizens can go and make comments on bills. You can go and publicly testify at hearings, and you can show up and be heard. And often those voices are skewed within the legislature because the people who show up are lobbyists. The people who show up have like an agenda, and it's often not ours. And so by us not being there, that's what we're getting. So I listed a few. Y'all can probably think of more, but it's like, if there's things you care about, there's meaningful ways to take action. And I think that's where a lot of the disconnect is. It's like, we care. It's not that people don't care. Like, we care, but we don't know what to do. And so one thing I want is to maybe provide you some resources or some ideals for how you can get plugged in and take action on things that are important to you. Did you want to say something? Yes, neighborhood improvement associations is another place where you can like have a direct impact on your neighborhood, and so that's a good shout out. You would be surprised how easily you can get on boards, on committees, like be the person making decisions. And a lot of it is just finding the right place to plug in. Okay, yeah, Black women have always been on the forefront of this. And before I talk about any particular woman that I have on this slide, I wanted to say, think about like all the movements. If you think about the Black Panther Party, it was largely women organizing that movement. The civil rights movement was largely women. Women's right to vote was largely women. Even trans rights movements was led by Black trans women. And so Black women have always been at the forefront of change. And think about the women in this community. Like, I almost went to some of y'all's Facebook pages and put pictures of us at the bottom because, like, I know that some people were going to be here that I know are community advocates, that you're a historian, that you're someone who would make this group for us, that Daisy is someone who is regularly out, like, doing grassroots organizing, that Farai recently, like, helped a family in need, directly helped, and that all of us are doing these things, and that we often need to like uplift the people around us. And so I just wanted to highlight that. I am going to talk about these three women, but just briefly. Unlike, I didn't do like a deep dive into these ladies. I wanted to find some interesting facts to hopefully be inspiring, but I probably won't be able to answer questions if you ask me questions. But we can go to the next slide, and this first woman I want to talk about is Fannie Lou Hamer. Hey, okay, I hear some fans. So she fought for civil rights in rural Mississippi. She challenged racist status quo. She pushed for desegregation. She worked with African American voter registration. And she was one of the leaders of the 1964 Freedom Summer Campaign. So this woman's pretty fantastic. Also had just like a long career in advocacy, of being in the work, of doing the work. And also looking up these women was very inspiring to me, even though I didn't do a deep dive. I was like, oh, they're us, we're them. It's fantastic. But you can go to the next one. This one in particular, so this woman went to Spelman, and against everyone's advice, she went to register people and try to organize students there. This woman's still alive, by the way, and is regularly giving talks and stuff, which is another thing I wanted to uplift. Like, some of our heroines, or like the people we admire, are still around. Like, Angela Davis teaches at a college in California. Like, you know, these people are still around, and we often like honor people after they've passed. So I love finding Gwendolyn as I was looking for these voting rights advocates. But we can go to the next one. Yeah, and this is Dorothy Height. I'm glad I picked some folks that you're fans of. Dorothy also did stuff like this picture up here of her, I think was from like 2018. Well, no, it wouldn't have been because she passed in 2010. But you know, it was from recent. It was from the 2000s, and so she lived a long life. I also love that photo I found of her like side-eyeing Dr. King, because she helped to organize these marches, and she, you know, like the March on Washington, she helped to organize. She helped John Lewis with his speeches, and a lot of times, you know, this came up right before I came up, like, we're playing background roles. I myself prefer a background role. If somebody asks me to be somewhere, I'll be somewhere, but I particularly like just doing the work, right? Like, you can see my work, you don't need to see me. But I just think this is really cool that a lot of times we are at the forefront of things, and just to uplift that. So I hope the things I've shared with you are inspiring, because next I want to get back to voting and like what we can do. So there's an election in November, and I want to make sure that everybody in here is registered to vote. That if you have, and we can go to the next slide, because at ksvotes.org, if you get out your phone right now and start typing on your phone, I won't be insulted. I'll be honored that you checked your registration. Have you changed addresses or moved or had a name change or anything? I'm surprised it's not finding you. Yeah. Yeah, because this is updated with the voter file. So if you're in the voter file, you'll come up on ksvotes.org. You just go to this website, you fill out this one-page form. It's literally one page. It takes like 30 seconds. It'll show you that you're registered. It'll show you where your polling place is. It'll tell you if you're not registered. I pulled up my husband's. It was a requirement of being with me that he be a voter. And so this is it saying, success, we found your voter registration. But even if you didn't find it, you could click to get registered. You could apply for an advance ballot. But it's a cool site that has a lot of features that are helpful as we're like going into voting season. Because I think a lot of times people will tell us what we should do, but not how to do it. And like, I always heard like, just go vote. You're supposed to vote. And I'm like, well, how do I get registered? Where do I go? What am I supposed to bring with me? Like, I didn't know any of the etiquette around voting. And so I'm that guy if you have voting questions. And this is that site if you want to make sure you're registered to vote. The next slide I think is my last slide, and it just has some other resources. These are all nonpartisan resources because that's my life. I like just uplifting other people's voices but not telling them what to do in any way. So these are all places you can just go for information, but they're not candidate websites. They're not blue or red or Democrat or Republican. They're just informational sources. So Vote 411 is where you can find stuff about the candidates that are running. You can check your local newspapers and social media because they always do like candidate surveys or stuff like that. You can check the Shawnee County website because we're in Shawnee County and their website's actually like super helpful. You can see when there's times to early vote, who's on your ballot. Like as it gets closer to the election, you can see a sample ballot. You don't have to be surprised when you get there. You can look and see what's on it. It's another reason I encourage mail-in voting because it's like a take-home test. So if you're at home and you're like, oh, dang, I didn't know the judges were going to be on here, you can look up the judges or you can look up, you know, whatever random seat that you weren't planning on. And so that's kind of nice. But I also like to tell people that if you're ever stumped in the voting booth, whip out your phone and Google. That's perfectly legal. Take your time and figure out what you're voting for. You don't have to leave stuff blank. But yeah, this is my final slide, so I'll wrap up here. I hope that this information was helpful. And if you have any questions about voting, yeah.
I have to I just had a question about you always hear people say, get a voting plan. What does that mean, and how do you get a voting plan?
Yeah, so a voting plan is just figuring out exactly. It's one thing to say you're going to vote, right? It's another thing that's like on Tuesday during my lunch break, I'm going to run down to my polling place because it's at the corner. And you having like a really clear plan. Because election day is always the first Tuesday in November, so it's always inherently like a work day or a school day. And there's been a lot of push to make an election day like a national holiday, but it hasn't happened yet. Your employer is legally required to let you leave to go vote if you are not off during polling time. So if you have to be working that like whole shift, then they legally have to let you go. But having a voting plan is really just the logistics of how you're going to vote. Am I going to vote by mail? Am I going to go early vote when it's convenient for me? Am I going to go vote on election day? And if so, like how am I going to get there? But it's really thinking through what your plan to do it is.
Which one of these websites tell you? Because we're always concerned about the mail-in ballots if it got counted, basically. So, is there a website that tells you?
Yeah, so on the Shawnee County Election Office website, it actually has a tracker for your mail-in ballot of like when it was sent out, when it was received, and that's kind of a cool thing that you can go and check. I want to offer assurance over any questions about mail-in ballots. Kansas has one of the strongest, like, securest elections in the country. And mail-in ballots have been in use literally since the Civil War. They were first created during the Civil War because soldiers were away fighting and couldn't vote. Literally, Lincoln won his election because of mail-in ballots. And so it's a very safe way to vote, and it's checked like in 3 or 4 different ways for verification. And so I'm saying all that to say you should feel very safe about mail-in voting. And if to answer your question, if you want to track it, you can do that at Shawnee County election website. Mm-hmm. Yes.
So if by some chance you're listening to this and you are not registered, what is your next step?
Yeah, next step is to go to KS. That's just the initials KS and then votes.org. And that website, you can fill out a one-page form that will let you know if you are registered to vote or if you need to get registered to vote. You can also see your information. So like if you've moved, you want to make sure your address is up to date so that you'll be at the correct polling place when you go to vote. So that is just a great one-stop shop for getting registered and making sure your registration's all good. Any other questions? All right, all right. Well, thank you guys. A provisional ballot is what happens when you go to vote and for any reason something's off. So say the address you give them doesn't match the address you registered with, and they're like, It's basically anything the election office needs to investigate before counting your vote. And so if you went to the wrong polling place and they're like, you're supposed to be on the other side of town, like, we'll let you vote, but you're going to have to vote provisionally. So and provisional ballots just mean they're getting a second check from the election clerk to make sure everything's all good before they're counted. That's true, but they might encourage you to go to your correct polling place. They might say, hey, you're supposed to be over off 10th Street. Can you go over there? And if you're like, I have no other way, this is all I got, it's here or no vote, then they'll probably let you vote provisionally.
All right. Thank you, Anita. So just to kind of summarize, and then we'll go into announcements or reminiscences of the DNC or whatever you want to do. Just to summarize real quick, I thought this evening was interesting because in the end, they really all did tie together. I mean, when you think about maybe if Ella had been first, and it's an example of a woman doing work, and not necessarily be recognized for it because of different systems in place. Then you go to Bell Hooks, who's like, okay, here we go. I see these women in the world and we are not being recognized for what we do. And as a form of resistance, I'm going to call it out and I'm going to get this put into the broader narrative. And finally, you have an example, wherever she went, of the broader narrative, meaning we have grassroots activism right here in front of us. So I think that's always kind of cool. I'm going to wrap it up tonight. Is there any community announcements? Yes, okay. You've been waiting for this for 2 hours. Here you go. Come, Ro. Come speak.
I know the mic. It's not really an. It's not really an announcement. The light. Since September 1st. Since September 1st, I read the Project 2025, and I decided that on September 1st I would dissect it since everyone doesn't want to read the whole thing. I read it, and I did a snapshot. I found a snapshot of it, and every day I place a new proposal, a different proposal, on my Facebook page. Now, my Facebook page is Rosetta Webb. If I don't know you, I don't accept you as a friend. I'm sorry, that's just me. I got 300 and something friends. But yeah, sure. But to get the word out, a lady from the Democratic office on Fairlawn that I volunteer at, I also posted on their site, and she said for me to do like a hashtag so anybody could see it. So it's under hashtag PJ25, and you'll see every single one from September 1st up until today's, and I'll keep putting them on there, a different one every day until I run out of them. I tried putting it on Black Topeka, but they've still got 9 in review. So I don't know which 9 that I've sent that they still have yet to review. I know they. Okay, well then you're gonna get the from September 1st. Okay, so if anybody says, well, I don't want to read, or I don't know anything about Project 2025, there's no excuse. I'm helping you out, people. And the Democratic office needs volunteers. So if you got time, volunteer. I mean, it's a bunch of little 80-year-old ladies, but that's okay. Oh, man, those ladies are brutal. They are. In a sweet way.
In a sweet way, okay. Oh, well, yeah, I do believe that part. Yes, yes, yes. Which one? Yeah.
All right, I went to the watch party last night for the debate at Cafe Casal, and I talked to the TV and yelled at it. Yeah, but they are trying to raise money for a billboard, the Topeka Region Women's Rights. Yeah, and if everybody, well, actually, it's Kansas Women for Kamala Harris, so it's the whole state, but the Topeka part. And there is a GoFundMe, and if somebody tells me where I can send it, I will send it, because you just click on the GoFundMe and put in your money, and they'll say thank you. Yeah, for the billboard on 21st and Gage. They need, well, they said 3,900, but then when I clicked on it, it's like 4,000 per, I don't know. And they want, if they get it in time, they'll get it from September 16th until November 5th. Because they're going to push on October 5th, they're going to do a march, a women's march on Wanamaker And then November 2nd, there's a rally. And then, of course, they're going to have a bulletin board for Harris Walls. So, like I said, I'm sorry. Let me go back here because they had the Amber Alert on there. Pray for that poor child. Doggone it. It's called, okay, let's see if I can get the group here. I can't. But it's the Topeka Region for Women's Rights and stuff. And I'll send it to you. And I can post it on here, on this group. Okay, I'll do that. But, if everybody chips in $5, we can get it up there and aggravate people, because I like aggravating people.
God was going to take care of it for her? Okay. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it can happen. I mean, I think we have to be open to those conversations. And while this has been taking a very Democratic slant, and it's even getting ready to take an even more Democratic slant, I can say that I have friends that are Republicans. So, with that in mind, this also is an open forum. So, if any of my Republican friends would like to post something, I am open to that. I am open to that. Yes, I am open to that. And I mean, if it's inappropriate, I will take it down. Let's not get it twisted, but I will. Uh, you know. So, Daisy, did you want to say something? And then, well,
Talking about the very Democratic scenario. So the African American Democratic Caucus of Shawnee County, I'm the current chair. John R. Williams is the vice chair. We're having a forum tomorrow at the Topeka Public Library, where essentially we're talking about voter education. We'll be having Shawnee County Election Commissioner Andrew Howell. He will be presenting about Shawnee County and his data currently and what is needed. We will also be having Christine Smith, who will be a community advocate about organizing the disenfranchised communities. And then we will have Voters Network, because one thing I understand is everybody would like to do this on their own accord. And I agree. So Voter Network, if you haven't heard of it, especially if you're at a level where you want to advocate for other people to come, it's a free platform where you can see voter information and the voter file information from your neighbors. So, for example, if I wanted to go on there, and I'll pick Anita. If I wanted to go on to Voter Network and I want to type in Anita Alexandra, and then it will tell me her voter information if she's registered to vote or not. And I can then bug Anita to come out to vote because now I have her information. This only works on registered voters. So Moran will be out there tomorrow. Yes, this is a Democratic partisan scenario, but I'm running a nonpartisan scenario tomorrow. So everyone to please be aware of that and treat everyone in a nonpartisan way so that they can come back again. It's about building relationships. On top of that, I don't know if anybody's here, but whoever would really, really like to start a Facebook group for like Black Women for Kamala, let me know. I think that's been missing for Kansas. So if anybody wants a Black woman for it and wants to be an admin and so forth, I'm looking for like 6 of them. I don't want to run this. Donna, you might have one to watch it. I need somebody. Just because I think our faces are being left, and I like Kamala, Kansas Women for Kamala, but it does not look like us, and it does not feel like us. So I would really like those groups to start, but I ain't got the time, y'all. So, and then I think, do I have anything non? Oh, I might have this date incorrect. October 15th at Washburn University, I believe, is a voter panel open to the students and non-students. So if you would like to learn about your candidates, local, county, please come out, because I think it will be focusing only on county commission. So that's a great opportunity. I knew somebody was gonna ask me. It's most likely going to be at 5:30. It's gonna be posted on social media. So if you go to right now, I believe the YWCA has it posted already. Or if you look in Facebook and you say voter network, you'll find it right there. So that will be there. And then the shameless plug: Kansas Black Leadership is having a brunch. I would love to see every lovely face in here there too. I would like to go in there and certain people will be like, oh, Kansas did come out, or Topekans specifically. So please, it's a free brunch. The lunch is free. It's about community leaders, organizers, professionals. I don't have it, but if you go to Kansas Black Leadership, you can see it's the last brunch, October 19th, that is.
Well, thank you, everybody, for showing up. Thank you, Anita. Thank you, Daisy. I don't have anything else except to say I do think it's really cool about Kamala. This is my partisan bit. This is the first time in my life that I've had a person in my peer group actually running for election. So I think she could be very representative of things I understand and know and how I experience life. So if for no other reason, you can get rid of the old white guy. I mean, literally, you could get rid of the old white guy. All right, I'm done, Carrie. Thank you.